welcome back to McFadden Family Homestead. We're so glad you came back. We are into week 3 of Pantry Challenge, and this week was really interesting. Starting off here, this was just kind of what we ate for dinner last Saturday. We had some turkey in the house, some lettuce that needed used up, and a good bit of tortillas, which we always have in plenty around here. So we had some turkey wraps for dinner, and then I had some tater tots. Which I did not take a picture of, but I put some tater tots in the oven, and that's what we ate on the side of this Saturday night. And then we also got this chicken in the oven, and that we're going to use for a couple of recipes this week. So we wanted to go ahead and get prepared and have that cooked and ready to go. You're going to see me moving really fast in this week's video. I actually was able to film a whole lot of footage. I spent a whole lot of time in the kitchen, and in my kitchen I have 3 wonderful windows, and when it snows, the kitchen is just where I want to be because I can look out those windows and I can just watch it snow all day long. So I spent a lot of time in here, and I ran the camera a whole lot, so I had to speed up a lot of these videos to make this to shorten this quite a bit, or we'd have been here all day. So we talked about snacks at the end of last week's video, and that's what we're doing here. In the pot I have sugar, butter, milk, cocoa powder, and we're going to bring that up to a boil. Once it comes up to a good boil, it boils for about a minute, and then you take it off the heat, and we're going to put the peanut butter, the salt, and the vanilla in it before we add the oats. So these are no-bake cookies. We needed some kind of snacks in the house. Those were running low, and this was what my husband actually suggested, and we had all the things that we needed for it. They definitely had more texture to them. I didn't have quick oats, which is what the recipe calls for, but they actually liked it. They liked that it had more chew and stuff, so they went over really, really well. And I will try to have as many recipes linked as I possibly can. Some of this stuff is just the way I do things, but I do have several recipes that I pull from Pinterest this week, and I will go ahead and link those for you down below. Monday morning we wake up to the snow falling, and so that just calls for a fantastic breakfast, and what ends up turning out to be an epic day in the kitchen. Here you get to see the beautiful snow falling in our backyard. There's nothing like watching fresh fallen snow. It just is so relaxing to me. It's so warm, it's so comforting, it's the best. So I had made some sausage, egg, and cheese biscuits. I had told you in the previous video about the folded eggs, how they worked out great in my new pan. And alright, at rapid speed we are going to make some pretzels and beer cheese soup for lunch. So right now we're blooming the yeast. We've got some sugar in there, some yeast, and I'm getting some warm water, and that's going to sit for just a little bit. I'm going to mix that up, and then we're going to get ready to get our flour. This pretzel dough recipe is new to me, and I will have it linked for you down below as well. So I had some melted butter, some flour. So we're going to let that come together and form a dough, and then we're going to go ahead and knead that a few times. I'm going to show you a little bit what it looks like in the mixer. It is kind of rough looking when you pull it out from the mixer. It doesn't get super smooth in there. So when we pull it out, we do have to knead it. It suggests about 6 to 8 times. In the pot of boiling water is 3/4 of a cup of baking soda. Pretzels are made like this, and bagels are made like this, and this technique gives the dough the chewy texture that you get from a pretzel and a bagel. So we're going to just leave those in there. It was about 30 seconds, and then you flipped them over and you did 30 seconds on the other side. And I literally stood there and counted 30 seconds for each one. And then we give them a little bit of an egg wash. I put just a small amount of salt on them because I plan to brush them all with melted butter and a little bit of fresh salt when they come out of the oven. So I just did a very small sprinkle of salt. Now that the pretzels are in the oven, we're going to get started on the beer cheese soup. This recipe comes from a book called The Step-by-Step Instapot Cookbook by Jeffrey Eisner. This is the same book that Becky at Acre Homestead used when she did her 5 Instapot recipe video. I had put that in my cart because I really was inspired by the recipes that she was making, and I thought it'd be a great place to start to learn how to use the Instapot. So far we have put our mirepoix in there. We had some carrots, some onions, some green peppers, and I just put the flour in to start making the roux, and now we're adding our liquids. This is a whole quart of chicken broth. It's going to be 12 ounces of whatever your favorite beer is. And there's going to be a little bit of liquid smoke that we're going to put in there. And then once we get all of that in, then we're going to go ahead and put the lid on, and it's going to cook at high pressure for 5 minutes. The pretzels are ready. We're going to pull those out. I'm just checking to make sure that they're not doughy inside. I'm going to brush each with some melted butter, and I'm going to put a little bit of fresh salt on each one. These were absolutely incredible. They did not last long in this house at all. They were gone in absolutely no time. A neighbor had taken my kids sled riding, and so we sent home with them a jar of soup and a couple of these pretzels, and my kids were very, very sad that there were not pretzels for days. Now back to finish off the soup. Right now I'm just kind of stirring it. I had just opened it up and it did thicken with the roux, but despite my best efforts, the roux did kind of stick to the bottom a little bit. I'm not sure why. I don't know what I could have done to prevent that a little bit better, but here we are. And so we're adding the heavy cream, and then the recipe suggested that in batches you add the Boursin cheese with the along with the cheddar, and kind of stir in between, get it melted, and then add some more. So that's what we're doing. We're just kind of taking this in turn. And then what you won't see that comes next is I will blend this with an immersion blender. It did not, maybe people know this, I don't know, but this is new for me. So it doesn't say to take the insert out before you blend it or anything. So if you're new to the Instapot and you have to blend something with an immersion blender, I would highly suggest taking the pot out before you do that. It kind of, if you do it inside, while it's inside the Instapot, like, it kind of creates this vibration, and it kind of does a whole lot of splattering, and it's just a mess. So I would not suggest doing that. So now we're seasoning with the rest of the seasonings. There was some thyme, there's Worcestershire sauce. I did not have Old Bay, so I used some Creole seasoning. There's nutmeg, and a little bit of hot sauce goes in here to finish everything up before it gets blended. So we're going to get that all mixed up, and then this is, I'm going to show you what it looks like before I blended it. You can see the roux that's kind of stuck on my spoon right there. You can see the bits of vegetables that are in the soup, and then I'm going to give you a clip here of what it looks like after I've blended it. You can kind of see there's a bunch of splatter even on my wall over there and on the lid, but it does make a really nice and creamy soup once all is said and done. And this was absolutely fantastic. On a snowy day, this was just the most comforting lunch ever. It just was so good, totally made from scratch, and totally worth the time that it took to do it. So for dinner that night, we're diving back into the Instapot again and trying the chicken and dumplings. This was one of the recipes that Becky had made that really wanted me to buy this, made me want to buy this book, because it looked absolutely wonderful, and it certainly was. And I did deviate from the recipe a little bit. It calls for to cook the chicken. In this process, I had already had my chicken pre-cooked, which you see there, and that's what I had pulled from the roasted chicken that I had made. But I was able to to work this out, and it was perfectly fine. You saw the sauteing vegetables there at the beginning. I didn't do any filming. I just took pictures of this because I had already been filming a lot today, and I was just kind of wanting to get dinner done. This is the dumplings before they were cooked. And then this is just some of the seasonings that are in there. There's sage, seasoned salt, a little more thyme. There's a cornstarch slurry there kind of in the middle, a little bit of cream. And that might be, I'm not sure what's in the red cup. I'll have to go back and look. Oh, sherry. They called for cooking sherry. This was really, really savory. This was really delicious. A little on the salty side. That could have been my seasoning salt. Who knows? But it was a little bit salty, but it was so good. It really had so much flavor. My husband is not a big fan of chicken and dumplings, and he said that this was the best chicken and dumplings he definitely has ever had in his life. So totally worth it. It was just, and the Instant Pot made it really easy. And for snowy morning number 2, some cinnamon rolls were in order. I'd had this little jar of cinnamon sugar on my pantry shelf for I don't know how long, so we went ahead and used that up along with some of what we had. I had a tiny bit of cream cheese left, so I made some icing with some cream cheese, butter, and powdered sugar. And I used the dough recipe from the strawberry rolls that I had made the week before, or I don't know, a couple weeks ago, but that dough worked out great for these cinnamon rolls. It was absolutely fantastic. Best cinnamon rolls, definitely, hands down, that I have ever made. On Tuesday, we tried our hand at some naan bread. I like to buy naan bread, and I make pizzas out of it. I make barbecue chicken pizza. Well, I've always wanted to try to make it myself, and so this was the perfect time to try and do something like that. And I will say, it's pretty simple. It comes together really easily. I will have the recipe linked below, and I would love to take a day where I make up a bunch of these, make a few batches, and make them up, cook them, and then freeze them to have them to pull from the freezer and just have these little like personal pizzas, you know, whenever we want to, whenever we've got stuff to put on it. It makes a great, great flatbread pizza. I absolutely love it. It was delicious. So being snowed in for a week kind of had its challenges. You suddenly had to have breakfast and lunch for everybody all week long, which was not planned for and not expected. So lunch a lot of times was kind of like this, sort of a hodgepodge of leftovers and whatever we could find around. So I had a leftover ear of corn that I didn't want to go to waste, and that was my lunch. We had a little bit of tortilla chips on hand. I think there's maybe a little bit of salsa on that plate. There's some crackers. I mean, who knows what. Lunch all week was pretty much like this. It was really just leftovers or, you know, whatever we could find to snack on here or there. Wednesday night we had spaghetti, and so I thought I would do some video and show you how we like to do that. I like to buy these ciabatta rolls when I see them, especially if it's like next day bread sale and stuff. Sometimes you can find them a little bit cheaper, and I'll buy a few bags and I stick them in the freezer, and all I do is I just butter them up really, really liberally, and I sprinkle some garlic salt on them, parsley if I have it, but I didn't happen to have any. So here in this pot is some diced onion I had in the freezer, and also some diced green pepper that I had in the freezer. This is how I'm going to make the spaghetti sauce. I used to make spaghetti sauce in bulk, and I would buy the big number 10 cans at Sam's and stuff, and kind of make my own and then freeze it. Well, when I was able to can my own homemade tomato sauce this year, I kind of adapted the same recipe to making a quart of sauce. So I'm just deglazing here with a little bit of cooking sherry, and I'm just going to stir that around. I did add 2 cloves of minced garlic just a second ago, and now I'm going to add an entire can of, I think a 6-ounce can of tomato paste. And I'm going to stir that around and just kind of let that heat up and pick up all of those delicious vegetables, and just take that around for just a minute. And then when that's ready, I'll open the tomato sauce and we'll pour the tomato sauce in there. And this homemade tomato sauce has really just been wonderful. I think, to me, it takes spaghetti night to the next level, because it's just so much better than anything that you can get on the shelf in the grocery store. And I just canned a very basic tomato sauce. Again, I only have a water bath canner at this time, so I just canned very basic tomato sauce with lemon juice and canning salt. And that's all that's in there. So it does tend to be a little bit acidic. This is, I've been buying these herbs. It's kind of like, it's almost like par dried, par fresh. They're a little expensive. I mean, that little thing, I think it's like $4 or something. But sometimes it can be really, really hard to find fresh herbs that are worth buying at the grocery store. And this is kind of a nice alternative. It has a long shelf life. It's got a really great flavor, and it gives you that flavor of fresh, of course, a lot better than your dried herbs will. And I had added some oregano as well. Right now we're adding some salt and pepper, and here in a second I will add probably about a teaspoon of sugar, just to kind of cut the acid a little bit. Yeah, and that's the sugar. And then I like to blend mine up. I don't like a chunky marinara sauce. I like it, relatively smooth. So I'm going to blend that up, and I'm going to add the ground beef to it to make a meat sauce. Right, now that we're getting everything all stirred up and ready to go, I'm going to slap a lid on that so it'll stop spitting everywhere, and I'm going to cook the spaghetti. I do break my spaghetti. Some purists will tell you that you shouldn't do that, but for us it's just easier to eat, and that's how I like to do it, and it makes it a lot easier when it's time to get the sauce on it, and it's a little less messy at the table with the children. So it's just a personal preference. And I'm going to get everything all mixed up. You can see our garlic bread is out of the toaster. The oven. I set the oven at 425, and I usually do it for about 5 minutes. I'll turn the pan around, put it in there for about another 3 to 4 minutes. Just depends on how quickly it browns. We did not have any Parmesan cheese, so we had to have some mozzarella on our spaghetti this night. We started our Thursday morning with a fancy cup of coffee. I had some foam in a can or something that my sister had here for Thanksgiving, and I've been putting it on my coffee these last few days. We all kind of slumped in, after a few days of no school and staying up late. We were all on a different schedule, and so we probably didn't roll out of bed until about 9 o'clock on this morning. And when we did, my daughter had requested a big family breakfast, so I went ahead and we put that together, and we had a really nice brunch. Lunch was kind of late in the day. It was probably 3 o'clock by the time that we ate this. This is just some steakums with onions and peppers, and I had 2 hoagie rolls from a recipe that I had made a few weeks back. After they were formed, I went ahead and I put them in the freezer to try and test pulling those out from frozen and just letting them thaw out and then rise and baking them to see if it would be a good recipe to just kind of have in the freezer for that. And as it turned out, it actually worked out really, really well. Of course, bread is always better fresh no matter how you slice it, but for something that came out of the freezer that day and then was baked fresh, this actually worked out really good. And I did not get a picture of the final Philly steak sub. Apologies for that, but the bread was fantastic. This was something I had pulled out of the freezer over the summer, kind of early fall. We had an absolute abundance of green peppers, and so I had taken some of those, and I made some ground beef mix that I make my husband's burritos out of, that I put in the freezer, and it's just ground beef and some green chilies, cumin, chili powder, things like that, and it was really tasty. And this is the first time I actually pulled it out to try and make it, though. I had melted some butter and put the panko breadcrumbs in melted butter, and then stuck that in the oven. Probably took about 30 to 40 minutes, and I think I had it on 375 to bake, because I was also baking this loaf of bread that you're going to see here in a second at the same time. And then when it came out, we just had heated up some queso and poured that over top of it, and that's what we had for lunch on this day. Our dinner on Friday night is an absolute family favorite. It is pineapple salmon. And again, this will be a recipe that I'll have linked in the description for you. We're going to lay out sliced pineapple on this sheet pan. I just have foil laid down and grease the foil. Just lay out the entire can of pineapple rings, and then the salmon is going to sit on top of it. And we're going to season the salmon with just a little bit of salt and pepper on both sides. And now that the salmon is seasoned, we're going to get ready to make the sauce. So this is, and you can't see it very well, this is Panda Express brand sweet chili sauce. You can really use any brand of sweet chili sauce. I've used different kinds and it doesn't make a difference. It's all delicious. So we've got sweet chili sauce, and I'm melting some butter in the microwave, which is why I keep turning to the left there. But we'll get that in a minute. We're going to have 4 tablespoons of hoisin sauce. There's going to be fresh lemon juice in here. We're going to have some minced garlic, and then we'll have the melted butter and the reserved pineapple juice. We reserved about a 1/4 cup of pineapple juice from the can that we had opened. And this sauce, and then the recipe, I deviate a little bit from the recipe because the recipe tells you to pour all of the sauce over top of the salmon and bake it that way. But I don't necessarily like how the sauce turns out that way. So what I'll do is I actually pour just a little bit, just enough to coat the salmon in the sauce, and then I'll put the rest in a pot, and then I'll cook that on the stove top, and it kind of helps to cook the garlic, and I just like the texture of the sauce better when it's been cooked, and then we pour it over top whenever everything's all said and done after that. When that's in the oven, we'll get started on the rice. I had rinsed my rice. It is important to wash your rice. You will not get the best texture if you don't wash it. So it is important. Just put it in a colander, run it under cold water, till it's all good and rinsed off. So I put it in the Instapot with 3 cups of water. It was 2 cups of rice, 3 cups of water, and I just hit the rice setting, and it's like on high pressure. It's like 12 minutes. Just do whatever is standard on the Instapot, and it comes out perfect every time. And so I've just got the sauce finishing up over here, and it just looks so, it gets shiny and just real nice, and it's so much better if you take a minute and you cook it rather than it just cook on top of the salmon. And this was actually before the salmon had went in the oven. We're also going to have peas, and this is what looks when it's all done. Just put the rice on the plate. I put some pineapple, lay the salmon over top of that, and it's absolutely just, it's delicious. Everybody loves it. My daughter likes to mix her peas in with everything. The rice just has a wonderful, jasmine rice just has a wonderful velvety texture. It's so good. You've got to try this recipe. Friday afternoon, I also made some pumpkin bread. I had really been wanting to make pumpkin bread since the fall, and I don't know, I never got around to it or never had time. And I just thought, hey, I've got the time now. Let me go ahead and make it. And I've had pumpkin sitting on the pantry shelf for quite some time, so I went ahead and I made this up, and it just hit the spot. It was so warm and comforting. And now I'm going to share with you something that is an absolute favorite. It might actually get the #1 vote in our family. We make homemade danishes. And I wanted to go ahead and record this and show these things to you. So what we're doing right now is making the butter that's going to go in between the layers of the dough. I'm actually going to do this twice. It's not videoed twice, but you need to make 2 of these. I will have this video or the recipe linked in the description box for you. It's a little bit tough to roll out cold butter, but it's not impossible. It can be done. And so that just stays in the fridge until we're ready to make the dough. I did not film making the actual dough, and I do apologize for that. It's a regret, but it actually comes together. It's pretty simple. It's a very straightforward dough. It's this part that you really need to see. Once you have the dough, you roll it out into kind of a rectangle shape. You lay one of the butter. There's a word for it, and I don't remember what that is. But anyway, one of the butter blocks you lay down, you fold one side of the dough over, and then you lay the other butter block on top of it, and you fold the other side over in like an envelope shape. And you can see as I'm rolling this out, you can see how the butter is breaking up and it's working its way into the dough and it's spreading out. And this is what's going to give you the flaky texture to your pastry dough. It's just, there's nothing like it. You could probably, I haven't done it yet, but you could probably make homemade croissants with this same recipe, with this same dough. Just roll it out into a wheel, and it's a whole other process to make croissants. But anyway, so I'm going to do this like 3 times. Do not do it more than 3 times. Ask me how I know. The more you do it, you think like, oh, make some more layers, but it actually doesn't work that way. The more you do it, the butter becomes soft and it will start to come out of the dough. The layers will become so thin that the butter will actually start to come out. So you don't want to do this more than 3 times, but you definitely want to do it 3 times. And that is what we're doing here. I think we're getting close to time number 3, but you can see all the little broken bits of butter is just absolutely beautiful. And I try to pinch it together. I'm not the best pincher. And it's actually, this is going to be the 3rd time. So we're going to just keep rolling it out. And then we're going to fold it up, and I'm going to wrap this up and put it in the fridge. Now I'm doing this Friday night, making this, and it's going to sit in the fridge overnight. I have just found that to be, it makes things a lot easier because then I can get up the next morning and work on just shaping the pastries. I am going to wrap this really loosely because this is a yeast dough, and when I made them at Thanksgiving, I had kind of wrapped it up too tight when I left it in the fridge overnight, and it kind of swelled out of the plastic. So I am wrapping this very loosely to give it room to kind of rise overnight so that it's not too constricted. And this is Saturday morning. I pulled this out from the refrigerator, and we're going to roll it out and we're going to get it shaped. And you can kind of see it does need a lot of work on this. It's all very cold, but it rolls really nicely. This really is some of the easiest dough, pastry dough that I have ever worked with. I love this recipe. I have done this. This is the 3rd time that I have made these, and they are absolutely fantastic. So here's where I deviate from the recipe just a little bit. I make these, the recipe wants you to cut this like or break it off into like little balls or whatever. I don't do that. I make them the way that I did when I was in culinary school. We made homemade danishes, and this is how we did it. We kind of sprinkled just a very slight amount of cinnamon sugar on top of the dough, and then we cut it in strips like this. And I'm going to ever so delicately twist each one of these strips. And it is a very delicate dough. You don't want to handle it too much and melt the butter, but I'm just going to kind of twist it and then sort of wrap it around itself to make this cute little flower shape. And here's what they look like when they're all done. And these do need to rise, so I've got the proof setting on my oven, and I'm going to wrap them cover them with a damp towel and put them in the oven to rise. And while they're in there rising, I'm going to make some glaze, just a very, very thin glaze. There's not going to be a whole lot of it on there, so I've got some powdered sugar, just a little bit of vanilla, and a tiny little bit of water, just enough to make the sugar glaze. Now I do 2 kinds of glazes when they come out of the oven. The first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to glaze it with, you can see here at the bottom, this is apple scrap jelly. It's not actually jelly. I've never made jelly before, and I still haven't, because this is not jelly. This is apple scrap candy, as you can see. But for my purposes and what I wanted it for, it actually works perfect. I'm going to heat this up with just a little bit of water in a pot, and it's going to be a glaze. When the pastries come out of the oven, I'm going to just around the sides, I'm going to use this to glaze them, and it just gives them shine. It's not absolutely necessary. You don't have to do it, but it does give them a beautiful shine. And then after I've done that, then we'll use the sugar glaze, and you'll see that in a minute. So right here, this is some home canned apple pie filling that we're using to fill our pastries, and we have a little bit, at my daughter's request, homemade strawberry jam that's going to go in a few of them as well. You can see how they've risen, and sometimes when they're in the proofer, the butter does start to melt a little bit. Not to worry, don't be afraid of that. It actually just kind of makes the bottoms like a little buttery and crispy, and these things are absolute perfection. Do not be afraid to make homemade danishes. They'll change your life. I mean, they really are. They're so good. So we're just going to fill all of these, use that whole jar. I wanted to use the whole jar of the apple pie filling, and then whatever was left, we're going to go ahead and use the strawberry jam. And the strawberry jam is probably more the favorite than the apple in this house, but we've got this apple pie filling. Let's go ahead and use it for something. So this is what they look like before they go in the oven. And then they're going to come out all nice and beautifully browned. Look at that. And so here's the glaze. This is the apple scrap glaze. You can see how it just gives them a beautiful shine, really pulls out that golden brown deliciousness on them. And then we'll take the, right now I'm checking because my brush likes to shed, my pastry brush likes to shed, so I'm looking for any stray hairs. And because it does happen sometimes. And so we're just going to glaze these up. This was for our Saturday morning this morning, and everybody enjoyed these, and we all have to exercise some serious self-control when it comes to these danishes, to not just eat them all in one sitting. And so that probably a lot of this week probably seems pretty excessive to have cinnamon rolls and breads and pastries and all of that, but it actually was just wonderful. It was a wonderful week in the kitchen. It was a wonderful week with my family. In East Tennessee, we do not get a lot of snow. It has been 3 years since we've had a really good snowfall here. And for, 1 week out of 3 years to really kind of indulge and have all the good, delicious, warm and comforting things is totally worth it and not so bad. So thanks so much for watching. Thank you for making it through this entire video. This was definitely a longer one, but I hope that you really enjoyed it. And if you want to hang out and see what we do for week 4 in Pantry Challenge, then go ahead and subscribe, give this video a like, and thanks so much for your support and have a wonderful week.